Is this working? Okay, my light's not working. Okay, if we could call the meeting to order for our viewing audience. This is a meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Council. That means the full council. And the purpose of today's meeting is to hear from the administration, specifically from the Senior Policy and Budgeting Advisor, Ms. Mary Pfister, on the, Mary's going to report to us today on the mayor's budget that was presented in yesterday's work session. Miss Mary.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Tuesday's work session. Forgive me.
I've prepared today just a short presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. So today I'm pleased to present to you a more detailed look at the mayor's proposed budget. Before we begin, though, I want to first recognize a few of our unsung heroes who have helped the mayor, and without them, we would not have been able to develop this budget proposal. As many of you know, when I was asked to be the acting senior advisor of budget position back in December, we were facing a daunting task due to our unsure economic times. While the budget projections at the time were bleak, my main concern about accepting the position was the impact it would have on the dedicated staff in the accounting division. As you're aware, from July of 2006 through December of 2008, the accounting division was faced with many hurdles to overcome related to the implementation of our ERP system. And as the spring rain brings beautiful flowers, that time period brought out the roses in the Division of Accounting. Many of the staff in that area routinely worked over 60 hours a week for months on end to achieve clean audit opinions in 2007, 2008. I was concerned about the impact on that staff by taking the dual role as the Director of Accounting and as the Senior Advisor when I accepted the challenge. But I did so because I knew that it would take a full team for LFUCG to be able to climb that hill that we were facing. Shortly after I accepted the position in December, the hill before us suddenly became even steeper. On February 9th, Scott Brown died unexpectedly while riding his bike to work. And on February 17th, we learned that Keena resigned, or I learned that Keena resigned as the Commissioner of Finance. And on that same day, Jim Deaton signed paperwork with the state to retire. I do want to take a brief moment to let Jim Deaton, who had open heart surgery on Tuesday, know that our thoughts and prayers are with him, and we hope him a speedy recovery. But within barely over a week, the mayor had lost 3 of his key financial people. Once again, the rain began, and the accounting division and the budgeting division stepped up to meet the personal and the professional challenges confronted them by losing 3 co-workers. At the same time, we were blessed that we had Connie Underwood, who sits beside me, a recently retired budgeting leader, return in our time of need. Connie has truly been our ray of sunshine on the cloudy day, and without her efforts, I believe we would not be able to complete one of the smoothest mayor's proposed budget processes seen by Jim Newberry. Through leaving no stone unturned, we were able to develop a budget that I present to you today. We have developed a mayor's proposed budget with a total appropriations of $558 million. The general fund appropriations are $279 million, which make up about 50% of this budget. We developed the general fund utilizing only $560,000 of the projected fund balance. And we have assumed a growth in total general fund revenues of only 1.8%, which would result in about $5 million. We've proposed no layoffs, but we are proposing to eliminate the net of the 96 full-time positions while adding funding for 5 new positions: an auditor, a software manager, and a minority vendor recruiter. will all be added to help our government work more efficiently and to bring competition to our purchasing efforts. As an end result, we should see a cost savings far in excess of the personnel costs associated with these 3 positions. I also want to let you know that we have added 2 positions as security guards that we plan to use for building security in the government center and in Phoenix. We plan to use them along with armed guards to man proposed metal detectors for both buildings. The metal detectors were included in the FY09 appropriations. This will provide a higher level of security for all the employees and for those people who attend public meetings. We have included additional funding that's required to meet the requirements of our police, fire, and corrections bargaining agreements, and we've provided for a 1% pay increase with a scale adjustment for our non-bargaining employees. This represents a total cost of about $932,000, $641,000 of which is coming from the general fund. We are not relying on our economic contingency to balance our budget, and therefore we have not provided for a draw in this budget. However, we have also not provided for the $50,000 monthly deposit to the fund. As you will learn when you do your Links Committee meetings, we are proposing a $3.5 million reduction in operating revenues in the general fund with minimal impact to programs or services. The general fund revenues of the mayor's proposed budget totaled $278 million. Sorry, you all, the mouse is not working very well. As you can see from this pie chart, the distribution of our general fund revenues have not changed materially from prior years. License fees and permits still make up the majority of our revenues, consisting of 83% of the general fund. Our ad valorem or property taxes make up the second largest category at 7%, which is just slightly larger than the third category of charges for services. Employee withholdings, which is part of our license fee and permits category, is our single largest revenue source for the general fund. It makes up 67% of the total revenues. As you can see by this chart, in 2009, we are projecting a modest growth of 2.4%. In reality, when we analyzed our employee withholding growth by payer, we are seeing a larger than 2.4% growth. Based on receipt analysis, which I performed in March, we are actually experiencing approximately a 4% growth in the amount paid by pay period. This growth is not seen in the overall collected numbers because we collected 27 pay periods during 2008, and we're only going to be able to collect 26 pay periods due to the timing of payrolls for any employer who pays on the biweekly schedule that's the same as LFUCG. When my by-payer analysis showed the 4% growth, I asked Connie Underwood to independently develop a projection of the employee withholdings. Connie turned to data provided by the state, which reports the Fayette County wages covered by unemployment. It reports the wages covered by unemployment by business sector. And in doing so, she was able to confirm that Fayette County wages being reported during that time showed a 3.6% increase, which correlated nicely with what we were seeing in our by-payer detail. With this analysis, we enlisted the help of Dr. Ken Trousky, who is an economist for the University of Kentucky. Dr. Trousky confirmed that many of the fears that we had when developing our $27 million deficit projection and that Bill O'Meara had reported based on the information of the governor's budget office in January were true. However, Dr. Trousky saw our data from the wages covered and unemployment, and we explained our current collections in light of having one less pay period this year for most payers than last year. He agreed that because of the nature of our economy and our heavy concentration in government, education, and health care, that there was some reason for Lexington to be shielded from the economic trends being experienced by the rest of the state and the rest of the nation. For this reason, you will see that we're projecting the 2009 growth to be slightly below our original FY9 budget at 2.4%, and in our mayor's proposed budget, we are assuming that the real wage growth for Fayette County will decline slightly, but still grow at a rate of 3%. As the mayor discussed on Tuesday, we have some major developments in the Markey Cancer Center, the Oregon National Library, and the BCTC relocation, which make us feel there is reason for legitimate optimism in the Lexington economy. We have purposely not relied on our economic contingency fund to balance this budget. We have done so because if our optimistic growth rate does not materialize, we will need to have those reserves to fall back on. The next revenue source that I'd like to discuss with you today is the revenue that we receive from our business tax returns, or net profits. This revenue makes up 11.3% of our general fund. As you can see from this chart, for FY09, an increase based on current collections is projected of 4.6%. Through March, our net profits are actually up from the same period last year by approximately 9%. So we have allowed for some anticipated refunds after the April 15th filings in our 09 projections. For next fiscal year, we are projecting a decline in this category. We are taking this approach based on the discussions with Dr. Trowski and based on our analysis of previous recessions. This is the area where Connie Underwood's 20 years of experience really helped. Based on our review of our history, it appears that typically we see a decline in business returns prior to seeing the tightening of our employee withholding revenues. By that, we think that employers are willing to try to keep more people on staff and have a lower bottom line before they start laying people off. So in our mayor's proposed budget, we are presenting that we will see this same trend as we've seen in other economic times, and we're going ahead and planning for the tightening of these revenues in 2010. The last revenue source that I'd like to talk to you about today is our property taxes, or the ad valorem taxes that we receive. You can see that this makes up 7.5% of our general revenue, 7.5% of the revenue in the general fund, and it makes up 91% of the revenue in the urban service fund. As you can see in this chart, the FY09 assessment growth is just 3.5%. This is significantly reduced from the growth experienced in prior years. Based on this knowledge and the fact that the Building Inspection Division is reporting for the first calendar quarter of this year that permits are up 20%, which includes a 40% increase in our single-family residential permits, we are projecting a growth of 4.4% in our real estate collections, which will result in $762,000. Based on data that was reported by Don Blevins Jr. regarding the decline we are seeing in our motor vehicle assessments, you'll notice that we are projecting motor vehicle taxes to decline just over 10%, or by $181,000. Our general fund appropriations are $279,000. In 2009, you can see that personnel made up 68% of those appropriations. And you can see in 2010, personnel still makes up 68% of the classification. The only categories that have changed from the 2009 to the 2010 mayor's proposed are operating, which has declined by 1%, and debt service, which has increased by 1%. As you will learn in more detail during your Links Committee meetings, our proposal has personnel appropriations increasing by 1.3%. This proposed appropriation is a result of the following things. We have allowed for the increase in the police, fire, and corrections contracts as required. We are accounting for the change in the CERS employer contribution from what was budgeted in 2009. We're providing for a 1% raise with scale adjustment, and we're covering the anticipated increases in the health costs that we are experiencing so far this year. We're factoring those into 2010. These increases have been offset by eliminating the funding of 96 full-time vacant positions, as we just discussed. Our partner agencies is actually increasing $373,000, a little over $373,000, which is directly related to the increase in the funding for the library. As you know, the library receives 5 cents on every tax dollar, and in the mayor's proposed budget, this will provide an increased funding to them of $579,000. Some of the increased funding has been offset by decreasing funding in other agencies. You can see a listing of the partner agencies provided in the mayor's proposed budget book that you'll receive today on page 40. The debt service has increased about $3.9 million, and this is primarily due to the issuance of the $70 million pension bond.
Mary, just a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is in millions, I understand that. Right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said that to begin with, that these are all in millions. Sorry.
It looked like a couple, sometimes I can't help myself. I sense anxiety among some council members occasionally that they may need to ask a question. Is everybody, I was actually particularly thinking you look pained, Dr. Blues. You're all right? All right.
Okay.
Please
Good.
proceed.
Yeah, and feel free to stop me at any time.
All right. I was just concerned.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Sure. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Sorry.
And we may need it in order to ask questions. So if maybe we could get them printed. I could be printing them, or you got printed copies already, Mary? Thank you. Thank you.
I apologize. There's a copy of right. Okay. Should we continue, or do you want to? Okay. Insurance, you can see, is we have proposed that we will decline or decrease the contribution we make to our self-insurance fund, the risk management fund, by $1 million. And as we talked about, the operating is declining by $3.5 million. And I really think you'll get the specifics from the division directors, but I do want to point out to you that the majority of this decrease was achieved through decreasing the professional services category for the budget. And we did include increases, anticipated increases in utilities in our operating, including our sanitary fee, which we self-imposed. Transfers are changing by 3.2%. Most of this increase is a direct result of not having the $4.5 million draw on the economic contingency fund that we had in FY 2009. Some of the $4.5 million increase has been offset by the municipal aid fund. We increased the municipal aid fund transfer to the general fund by $1.2 million this year to cover cost in streets, roads, and forestry, and to cover some cost in engineering. We also allowed for a transfer from the Internal Revenue Bond Fund, which will go to support the Office of Economic Development. Capital is proposed to just slightly change by over $200,000. Now I'd like to take a minute, if we can, to go through the book that you received on Tuesday. I don't know whether can you put the page up? And you'll notice in your book, I know it's a very large book, but it's what we're statutorily required to provide to you. And you can tell that there's a table of contents which you'll be able to find that lists by division or by department all the divisions. And then under each tab, we have a summary of the total revenue and appropriations for each fund, followed by a revenue schedule, which will show you what we're projecting and what the 2010 is. And then there's some detail that summarizes by department the expenditures. But I wanted to specifically talk to you about the report that makes up most of the report. It's a computer-generated report to make sure that this report makes sense to you. Well, it's on page 52 is the one that I'm showing here. It's the division of budgeting. Oh, we'll wait for a minute to give them a chance to pull it up. That's okay. Okay. And I don't know that that's going to help much, but hopefully most of you have your... Okay. Okay, so you notice where there's the letter A, that area will summarize the overall division's budget in 4 categories. So it'll summarize it by personnel, operating, transfers, capital, and then we'll give you a total for each division. Then below that, you'll have by their what we call department ID and section. So here you can see it's budgeting administration, and it's just the generic section, unallocated. There'll be in section B, you'll see, or where letter B is, you'll see the listing of the specific accounts. So for instance, this is the budgeting division, and you can see that in 2009, the original budget for the civil service salaries was that $381,000. So you can see where that's the original budget column. The next column that you'll see is the requested column. And the request, again, is in this, for personnel, will be the dollar value of all the budgeted FY09 positions at the FY10 cost, okay? In the operating section, which if you look over around section B again, further down where the accounts start with a 7, those are all of our operating accounts. And so you can see that the conferences and other training here, there is a budget of $2,800 is the 09 budget, and the division of budgeting has requested $1,410. This request, I need to caution you for the operating, the departments were instructed to enter their request with a 10% operating reduction, okay? So the request column doesn't necessarily mean what the department wanted. It's what they received in 2009 less 10%. They were able to allocate it between department codes however they saw fit, but the request does include a 10% operating reduction throughout. Yes. Yes.
Should I be on mic? Can you go back to what you said about civil service salaries? And you said budgeted FY09, and then go say that again, what you said.
The civil service salaries in the request column is the dollar value for all budgeted 2009 positions at the 2010 cost.
Filled or unfilled?
All of
them.
positions. So
Okay.
if it was budgeted in 2009, The request 2010 column includes that cost for that position. Now, if you notice on the civil service here, the request 2010 is $361,400. If you notice, the mayor's propose is only $259,000. This is an example of where there was a decline in, we had a vacant position, Jim Deaton's position, that is not being funded in this budget. So that is the reason. That's an example of why the request would be different than the mayor's proposed. Okay, so the difference between, on personnel, the difference between the request and the mayor's proposed are those 96 positions that the mayor has eliminated funding for, and any increases we received. For example, when you flip through police and fire, you'll notice that there are increases in their overtime that are projected. That's because we know that we have some fixed staffing that we have to meet in those areas. And so we've included additional overtime because we are planning on not filling all the positions. Okay? So the difference between, on personnel, the difference between the request and the mayor's proposed would be any changes in the kinds of positions that are being reflected. Okay?
Carrie? Is there any one document that says for each division how many vacancies?
Yes, there is, actually. And I emailed it out to each one of the division directors today. And I can, it's a PDF, I can send it to each one of you as well. Or, I'm sorry, it doesn't have vacancies on it. This document contains the budget, the positions that were budgeted in 2009, and then what's being budgeted in 2010 and the difference. So we can say, I'll send that out to you guys.
I'm sorry, but how can we know how many positions based on that? I don't know the salary for each person, so I wouldn't know how many, if you showed the differences between, is it salary that you're showing there, or is it the number?
Positions.
Oh, thank you.
Number of positions.
Okay, thank you.
So if we flip to the division of budgeting here, you would see that they had, for overall, they would have a negative, and I apologize, I'll send this out to you guys. They have a negative, 1 by the division, the director of division account of budgeting, and then, you'll be able to confirm that there was a position eliminated by looking at the big budget book in the detail, and that would give you the dollar value of the changes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yes?
Okay, now just to clarify what you said about operating, Mary. Let's see, the 2010 request in the operating accounts reflects the request minus 10%. Did I understand that right?
No, actually, in the request, division directors were asked to enter in their operating budget at a level that was equal to their FY09 budget less 10%. The reason we did that, and the mayor spoke to this a little bit in his budget address, but when we started with the budget process, as you all know, we were looking at a $27 million deficit. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to prepare the best possible budget. So when we went out with the what we call budget call, when we called all the department directors in and handed out, began the budget process, we asked them in EPM, which is our budgeting system, to enter that request with operating having a 10% decrease. Because we knew that no matter what, we were going to need at least that. I mean, even if the economy turned around, we knew we were going to need at least that, because we knew that we had increases in debt service and things that were going to require at least that much of a savings. And then, in addition to what they entered, does that make sense?
So the request Is fiscal year 9 minus 10%?
Yes, and then,
So-
but the departments allocated it between accounts, how they saw fit. And if they were not able to, if there was a division, and a real good example of this is the division of purchasing. Purchasing was not able to meet their 10% reduction plan because they don't have a large enough operating budget to be able to absorb a 10% cut. So through the budget process, Keena made sure that at the department level that the cut was met. And so there is allocations between divisions if a division was not able to meet it. But yes, it does include a cut.
So that's why you don't see a true 10% reflected in
Right.
every one of these?
Exactly.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, so in addition to entering this 10% request, we had departments prepare a spreadsheet where they actually gave us 3 plans. They gave us one plan that said, what would you do, what would you need for personnel and operating if you could only receive the dollars that you received in 2009. The second plan that we had each department do was a 7.5% cut from the 2009. And the third plan was a 15% cut from the 2009. So departments went through a second exercise that actually included personnel where they came up with, what their reduction plans were. And they gave us the bullet points as far as what the impact from an operational perspective would be should we choose any of those plans. When the process started with the budget, the mayor quickly saw that the impact in reading those budget bullet points, the impact of the 15% plan was just completely undoable, not possible for police, fire, corrections, and a handful of other small divisions. So what we started with was a 15% cut. The plans that were submitted by division for the 15% cuts for all areas with the exception of police, fire, corrections, parks, social services, accounting, revenue, and purchasing. Because those divisions, it was felt, did not have a large enough budget or the concentration of their personnel budget to their operating budget would just provide undue hardship by doing the 15% cut. So those divisions where the starting point was a 7.5% cut. So we went through the process, and we came up with what we were projecting using those cuts, the plans, using those plans as submitted by the divisions. And the mayor conducted budget hearings. And soon thereafter, we learned that implementing those plans were going to mean significant layoffs. And this was all going on at the same time that we were having all the discussions with Dr. Trowski that we talked about. So we felt better about our revenues, given that we had an external party come in and help us and give us some guidance on where he thought we should be. And we backed off on the plans in some manner. What we did was we started with, as I said, the 15% plans for the majority of the divisions. But then we said, okay, if the position that they are recommending to be cut is currently filled, we're not going to cut it. So we added back any position that was on the list to be cut under the division director's plans that was currently filled. And that's how we arrived at the 96 positions that we ended up being cut. Because of that process that I just described, you really can't look at Division A versus Division B and apply a flat cut percent. Because, taking the example, not to pick on Brian Markham, but taking the example of purchasing, purchasing has very little operating dollars. So when he did his plan, he naturally had to go to personnel to be able to meet his plan. Whereas another division may have had large operating dollars, and so they would not have hit their personnel as heavily. And so in that result, you know, Division A would not have the same percentage cut at the end of the day as Division B did because of the way that the process was approached. But I do feel like that the mayor's proposed budget is a very, very good plan. I think because of the process and exercise that we went through, I think that we were able, when division directors were faced with putting someone's name on a list to, you know, as a potential cut, it really made them go through their operating accounts and make sure that they had everything that they possibly can out of their operating accounts. And, you know, I think that that's the reason we were able to get the 3.5 million. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have one more question,
Okay.
but it's not about this.
Okay.
It's about something you previously said about the transfers, and you were talking about the revenue.
Yes.
And I was just curious about what the thinking was in taking dedicated fees for the landfill to balance the general fund.
Actually, we didn't take the dedicated taxes from the landfill to balance the general fund. We have a contract with Republic to provide recycling that's in the landfill. And that contract is a 5-year contract and has a 5-year renewal option, which comes up this fall. Part of the original contract, Republic, 5 years ago, paid us $1 million for the right to have that contract. And I'm probably not saying the legal appropriate terms, but basically that contract has a clause where we receive $1 million. It has nothing to do with the operations. They give it to us to spend however we want. We have the option to renew that contract this fall. And so, you know, our intentions are if we renew with them or if we decide to renew with anyone else, we should be able to, at a minimum, receive that $1 million.
Okay, so it's not, I thought when the mayor gave his budget address, he said $1 million from the landfill fund.
He did. It is from the landfill fund.
But it's not from taxes that the citizens have paid. So where has that money gone in the past?
Actually, the last time that it was received, it's my understanding it was during the Teresa Isaacs administration, and the money came into the landfill fund as revenue and then was transferred to the general fund for general fund support. So we're just recommending that we do that same practice this time when we receive the funds for that contract.
Thank you.
So, yeah, as far as the transfers, if you look on page 2, you'll see that obviously under the appropriations, it's clearly marked as transfers to and from other funds. That's the line item where we accounted for last year the $4.6 million payment from the Economic Contingency Fund that we were planning on. And you'll see that the reason why it's changed to 3.2 million is because we don't have that payment this year planned. But in that line item, the key changes are that we are eliminating 3 key things, I think, are the take home. Or not eliminating, but adding. We're adding $1.2 million from, or actually about $1,080,000, I believe, from the municipal aid fund to support functions in streets, roads, and forestry, and to support engineering functions. And that is what the intention of those funds are to be used for. So there's added funding for municipal aid, or from the municipal aid fund. We also have the IRB fund, or Internal Revenue Bond Fund, which historically we've always used for economic development. And in this plan, we're proposing that we use approximately $100,000 from the IRB fund to support the expenditures for the Office of Economic Development for this year. The third thing in that line item that has changed is in the FY08 budget, there was a transfer from the general fund to the stormwater fund of approximately $370,000, and we have eliminated that in this plan for 2010. So that's the big major changes for the transfers on that line item. But if you go up above where you see other financing sources in the revenue section, and you'll see that we're budgeting $4.8 million, which is up from the 09, which was only $679,000. That is the line item where you'll find the $1 million that we are including to transfer from landfill for that from the payment from whatever vendor, be it Republic or whoever we choose to contract with. We have additional funds from the police, from the Prisoners Activity Fund, which was, I believe, about $1.9 million. We have additional funds in there from the mineral severance and coal severance, which I believe total about $1.2 million. So those are the funds that we're looking to draw one-time monies from to help balance the budget. There will have to be public hearings for the coal and the mineral severance transfers at some point, should you choose to approve that in the final budget. Okay, so that's all the transfers that are on there. So does anybody have any other questions as far as the big book and the reports? Because I do want to make sure that you know what it looks like. No questions? Okay. And then I believe you just had passed out to you a smaller book, which is summary information. This book is the one that we talked about at the council retreat. And how we prepared this book, you'll see a lot of the schedules are the same as what's in the big book, but we actually have some explanations and more graphs and figures on the revenue. And for the departments, each division, each commissioner developed what the description of their division service, and the budget highlights the bullet points of the impact of the reductions that's being presented. So the bullet points, for the most part, were received from the commissioners and the division directors to the extent that they enlisted their help for this document. Okay?
Mary, I've got a question.
Okay.
This is just kind of a context question. Earlier, when you said the budget reductions that were asked at the 10%, 15% levels, what did y'all start out with?
7.5,
7.5, 10, and 15, and those came out of, and those reductions were asked of the commissioners and directors out of the operating
and personnel.
and personnel. Okay.
The 7.5 and 15 and flat were operating and personnel.
Okay.
What they
ended up-
entered in the system was just an operating reduction of 10%.
Okay, so no personnel, there were no personnel reductions. Okay, so in absolute dollars, how much, so you were originally trying to get 27 million out of X. What was X? Because
We
operating,
were
that
looking
budget.
at a $27 million deficit.
On a total of 275 million.
Yeah, but if you were just, if it ended up just coming out of the operating side.
Let me clarify. There were two sets of instructions. The first instruction was only look at your operating, and out of that operating, we took out things like utilities and contractual obligations. So we're looking at the operating that they had some sort of control over. 10% of that, one assignment. The second assignment is look at your total budget and tell me what you do with same as last year, which means you've got to cut something because everybody's getting these increases in personnel costs, or a 7.5% total reduction, 15% total reduction. So it was two exercises. The 10% was operating only, flat 7.5 and 15 was their total budget.
But to answer your question, the total appropriations that we were projecting originally were $292 million. And that was going to end up in a result in a deficit of $27 million.
Total expenses were 292.
Yes.
And revenue projected
Yes.
was 278.
Do you want to go through the?
Oh, no, I'm just trying to understand
We
what the
were-
methodology
originally we-
was
okay.
for arriving at.
Our original revenue estimate was that we would be below the 09 adopted revenue by $7 million. So we were originally in January anticipating revenue to decline by $7 million.
Okay.
Revenue ended up in the mayor's proposed budget increasing by $5 million. So that relieved $12 million of our projected $27 million problem. Okay?
And the other 12 then came out of the operating numbers, right?
Well, operating, configuring debt service, agencies, everything that's below that revenue line.
So personnel, from our projections, personnel, we were, from what we projected to where we ended up being a $2 million difference. So that brought us up to the 14. Debt service, we in the plan, in the mayor's proposed budget, we're actually proposing that we delay the issuance of some of the bonds for the 2009 projects because we feel like we can cash flow those. That's reducing what we anticipated the debt service to be by about $2 million.
All right. I don't want to hold everybody up for these
Okay.
questions. I can come back.
Okay.
to them.
But I've got all that if you want it, of how
I
we,
think everybody's just beginning to begin reviewing
Right.
the budget. So I suspect that really don't have the level of questions yet anyhow. So today, it's more of review on you guys' part.
Right.
Give us the headlines. Give us anything that you think that we're not going to be seeing unless we start digging and then we discover something. That's really the reason for the context that I was asking for.
well, hopefully
Yeah,
we've
we can
done
ask
that,
questions, sure. Okay, are
in-
we ready for more questions then?
Yeah.
All righty. Questions? Councilmember Lawless.
I'm not sure you would have the answer to this question, but I noticed there were some things like the county attorney's office there's been no decrease in that.
Yeah, the county attorney specifically, he had requested, if you notice, I'm not sure exactly what page he's on, but if you notice, he had requested an increase in his funding level, and so for that reason, the mayor actually had budget hearings, listened to what each person said that came into the hearings, and made an assessment based on the impact of a cut on their division.
Yeah, most of them, especially the partner agencies, did have an increase, but at least,
Well, it's been a little while since I've been here, but I think that the county attorney, did he not come after the first of FY09 and ask the council for additional funding that you all then gave him? Some, at least, yeah. Some of, and so his request reflected the fact that he had been, after adopted 09 was in place, he didn't get that additional money kept in his 2010 budget. So in that respect, he does have a budget cut because you gave him additional money after the beginning of 09, after the original.
are there places where we can get details of how these different folks spend that money?
Well, I think that the
I mean,
big budget book,
and I don't mean to pick on the county attorney, certainly,
Well, the big
'Cause I
budget
might
book will
have
give
to-
you by the account code, the nature of the expenditure, so,
Have much for him.
but it's not going to have a whole lot for him, as Connie just said. So, over and above the level of detail we have here, really the department director or the county attorney, whatever area it might be, would be the best source to find out what they're doing with those funds.
The Commonwealth attorney I saw was cut, but I'm not sure what we are supplying them.
Well, we can provide you with, for the constitutional officers, with all the information that we received from them on their request, if you'd like us to.
That'd be great, thank you.
Questions? Anyone else, any council members have any more questions? Going once? Going twice? And Councilmember James?
Thank you. Let me see, I wrote down a question, let me see what it meant. On the property tax, you had on your slideshow, you had, was it 4 million? I can't remember what it was. The
increase in
estimate?
the property tax?
Yeah,
It's not 4 million. It's, hang on.
All revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was that much?
Property tax, I think, was only like 790.
Okay.
760.
it was, I guess it was like a 4% or something, I forgot what
Yes,
the.
it was a
okay.
4.4% increase.
Okay, do we factor in exemptions in that, or is that, like, how do we take into account what folks are eligible for like the homestead exemption, disability exemption? Are we tracking that to kind of see who's finally reaching that age where they qualify for this and who's disabled and that sort of thing?
When we do the budget, we do an estimate for property taxes based on historical information. In the fall, when property tax bills are actually sent out, the bills actually take into account any homestead exemptions, disability exemptions, and we get that information from the PVA in the fall when assessments are actually put in place.
So our timing's just kind of quirky there.
We estimate now, and we actually don't know the information until the fall.
And when we get that, is that something you can report out as soon as you get that to our Budget and Finance Committee?
Actually, that you all will have to take action at that time, and I haven't been through that process yet, but Connie has for many years, so.
When you all come back from your break in August, you will probably be hit up fairly quickly thereafter
Okay.
with a decision on property taxes.
Is that packet that's like this thick when we first come back? Probably, the first work
We
session.
normally, the Division of Budgeting normally puts together a bunch of information for you all on that, and in that information will be the value of homestead exemptions and the value of assessments for different categories of property and things like that.
Okay. And I guess I'm just looking for kind of trending and estimating. You take that into account. So if you're looking at the demographic and you're looking at the ages and you see that folks qualify, you're taking that into account with your estimate, or you're just basing it on last year?
We based it on historical. I don't think that there's been significant difference in the homestead exemption. It goes up every 2 years statutorily. But
Not the number, not the dollar amount, the
Number of people.
amount of people that are eligible.
it's not changed dramatically yet.
It might, because I'm going to start spreading the word about it. But no, seriously, we're working really actively with PVA, so it may be that an estimate of an increase of 4.4 might, depending on how fast we spread the word and how far we get with it, that might seriously affect.
Well, and
Actually, Councilmember James, any word that you spread now would not be effective until January of 2010.
Okay.
That's the effective date of any exemption.
Okay, good, then that wouldn't affect this. Thank you. And a couple more questions. Let's see. Can you explain what you meant when you said it factors in the 1% raise, and you said with scaled adjustment? What does that mean?
that means that if for a specific pay grade, the maximum pays $100,000, we're actually raising, or not $100,000, because there's not many of that, but $50,000, then we're raising that max to be 55, or, to be 1% more than that.
Okay. And let's see. You talked about the increase in the library. Can you explain that just a little bit more of why that's greater this year?
The library actually receives 5 cents of every dollar for property taxes. So because we are projecting a 4.4% growth in the property taxes, that in essence increases what we have to pay them. Because it's my understanding there's a court order or state statute that we have to fund them at that level.
And is that based on our fiscal year? I'm trying to figure out how that works, because say that estimate is wrong.
Well,
then
what
how do we?
happens is annually, we go back and true up. So annually, we go back and we say, okay, if last year was wrong, we owe you or you owe us, and then we revise the estimate for the remaining part of the year. So we just did that last month, actually, for this fiscal year. So, annually, we'll go and we'll say, we start to pay them based on the budget, but then if we start to see that our budget is going to be off a little bit, we go back and revise the
And you
payments.
adjust the numbers?
Yes.
So it's not ever that they're going to be owing us back money, it's just that it comes out of what we would be giving them?
Right, we would, if they owed us money, then we would reduce their future payments, over the next 12 months to recoup that money.
Is that something that council knows about? Is that something that's brought to our attention, or it doesn't really have to come back to us once you have that?
Well, you know about it in the form that we do a budget amendment to
Okay.
adjust what their receipt's going to be.
Okay. And you talked about that the IRB funds would go to support Economic Development Office. Have we estimated what the expenses are? Is that just for Anthony's salary?
It's for his, he has his own department ID. And so when there are operating expenditures related to Anthony's area, then he charges his department ID. And then we're covering his salary in addition to that.
Okay.
I don't think his operating expenses are very large off the top of my head. They weren't, they're minimal.
Okay.
So the bulk of that money is Anthony's salary.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Gorton wants to clarify.
I just wanted to clarify, since we're on air for the public, the property tax is 8 cents on the $100 assessed value, and the library gets 5 of the 8 cents
That is correct.
on $100 assessed value, not a dollar.
Yes.
Councilmember Feigl.
Thank you. I think what I heard you say is that you're projecting a 4.4% increase in property tax and possibly some other new revenue. And if your projections are not accurate, then funds would be taken from the rainy day fund. Is that correct?
Actually, for the property tax, under House Bill 44, we are allowed to increase the property tax revenues for up to 4% on existing properties. So, we have some opportunities there. As Connie said, in August, you guys will receive the property tax assessments, and you'll have the opportunity to set the rate to either adjust it up or down based on those assessments. So we have the opportunity there. Right now, we think our property tax assessments are going to increase about 3.5%. So
That's with new growth?
no, that is existing is going to be 3.5%. The Division of Building Inspection has actually seen a 20% growth in the permits that they've issued, and 40% growth in the residential permits. So that's factored into this as well. So, we may be able to achieve this 4.4 without any change in the tax rate, but under House Bill 44, we would have the opportunity to change the tax rate depending on the assessments, should we not have the assessments at the level we need.
Okay, but my question really was about the rainy day fund.
Okay, the shortfall would come from 2 places, actually. If there's a shortfall, part of the beginning part of the presentation is stated that this plan is going to utilize $560,000 of our projected 09 fund balance. We're actually projecting the '09 fund balance to be greater than that. So, so it would come from either projected FY09 fund balance that's not yet been utilized, or the economic contingency fund, which currently has a balance of about $13.2, I think, million.
That was my question. Thank you.
Sorry.
Anybody else? Nope. All right. If we have no further questions, then, Councilmember Blues.
Not a question. I just wanted council members to tell you that the schedule for the General Government Links meeting is in your mailbox. So you're welcome to join us for any of those sessions starting next Wednesday.
Thank you, sir. That reminds me, I had written down here to, does everyone now have the schedule for the Committee of the Whole meetings? I think you do. You should have them now. All right, then we don't need to announce that. Okay. Then the chair will entertain motion to adjourn. Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.